What's up, guys, and welcome to the Rebalance podcast, where we dive into topics that matter most when it comes to overcoming struggles, injuries, and finding balance in your life. Everybody's idea of balance is that bit different, so my goal is to give you different perspectives, practical tips, as well as expert insights into what it means to live a balanced life. My name is Robbie Cassidy. I'm a physiotherapist and a health coach, and I've been helping people reignite their love for challenge, overcome their fear, and find more balance in their life through the process of self-development. So, let's get into it. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. On this episode of the podcast, we're going to look at why I tell people often to lean into the pain a small bit more. And the reason I want to do this one is because it's definitely a theme that has cropped up a lot this week in calls, in the last couple of weeks in calls that I've been doing with clients, because I think one of the main things when you're dealing with an injury, whether that be an acute injury or it's a chronic injury, the thing holding us back from recovering faster a lot of times is the idea that we're afraid of the pain and that we fear the pain because we don't know what's causing it specifically, and we're always afraid to make it worse because obviously pain is a good signal from the body to stop doing things, and in most cases. But the thing is that when you're dealing with an injury, oftentimes this pain system or sensitivity to pain can increase massively. And I always use the example of when you sprain your ankle, the size of the ligament that you actually sprain is tiny, but your whole ankle blows up and it gets really tight and it gets really sore. So why is that? Well, what happens there is your body turns up the pain system so that you start moving it all together while it gets an understanding of what's going on. That's a really simple way of explaining it, but hopefully it helps you to understand that we can have pain without injury. So just because the whole ankle is sore and tight doesn't mean that the whole ankle is damaged. It just means oftentimes that we've injured a small bit, the system has gone a small bit overreactive, and as a result we get a lot of pain with every movement. But when you start to lean into it a bit more, you start to notice that many of the movements actually are not that painful at all, especially after 3 to 4 reps. You find that it's a lot easier and the ankle moves around a lot better. So why is that? Because if there was damage everywhere, it should always be the same amount of pain. Now, let's say if you have sprained your ankle in a match or a run or whatever it was, wherever you sprained it, and then you start to invert your ankle and you isolate that ATFL ligament on the front, if that is the ligament that's been damaged, you'll get significant amount of pain that most likely doesn't ease off the more you lean into it, okay? Because you're really focusing on the injured area here, and your body knows that if you continue pushing that area, there's more of a chance of it injuring even more so, okay? Or getting worse, I should say. So when we know that and we understand that system and how it works, we can play with it a small bit, and we can use that to our advantage. Because when you're looking at a chronic injury especially, what happens is that pain system fires off and then it takes a long time to calm down because it's gotten so used to being overactive all the time. Okay, a really, really, really simple way of explaining it, but in a lot of cases, that's what it is. You have your nervous system, you have this idea of the burn spot on your nervous system. I won't get all into this episode. If anyone is interested in it, I've done other episodes on it. Understanding your chronic back pain is one, or you can go into the description of this episode. I go down and get the free ebook that I talk about the burn spot and how it develops and this pain sensitization and everything around it, because it will really help you to understand it in more detail. It's such an interesting topic, though, I really think, because pain is such a good indicator of different factors that are going on, and it's a really good indicator that something needs to change. So when you look at your life and you pick out different things, you can say, okay, like you can literally get pain from having conflict. Like having an argument with somebody can cause you to get neck pain, which I bet nobody has ever considered that before. It's so important to understand that all these other factors affect your nervous system and affect the pain that you can get. And you can, a lot of the time, I would go as far to say that the majority of the pains that we get on a day-to-day have nothing to do, or very, very, very little to do with the physical side of things, and it's more to do with the emotional side of things. When you just start to get a random neck pain out of somewhere, unless you have been, let's say, if you were holding the same position for a long time, and I mean a long, long time, and you haven't even moved an inch, there's a possibility that you start to get a bit of tightness there because the body wants you to move. But when you move, it starts to clear up a small bit more. Okay, so that's a simple example. But in a lot of cases, if you look at that neck pain that you're getting, and you're only getting it on a Friday, and it's because you're sitting in the same position, well, is it because it's a Friday, you're fatigued, you have to get things in before the weekend, you've been fighting with someone, you had a lot of meetings with the office, or you may have certain timelines that you need to put in. All of those other factors contribute to that pain being either a 1 out of 10 or 8 out of 10. Okay, and that's why it's really important to understand this. So when I tell people to lean into pain, it's really that what we're trying to do is we're trying to decrease it overall. Okay, I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but by leaning into it, you get a little spike in it, but generally afterwards then it starts to come down and starts to normalize a bit more. And this isn't the case with every injury. As I said, this is more to as you learn about your body, because this whole podcast is about understanding your body, learning about your body, learning how your mind-body connection, or learning about the mind-body connection, I should say, how it interacts with your environment and everything around you, and trying to find ways to live that more of a balanced life, and trying to balance out your nervous system in a lot of ways. It's definitely what it has been more recently, because of the conversations I've been having with people and the clientele that I'm dealing with, is the majority of them are dealing with these type of chronic injuries that have taken over and taken control of their lives. So right now, what I'm looking at when I say lean into the pain, and an easy example is that I was working with a lady recently, and she had severe back pain that affected her ability to walk in the end. Okay, so she had consistently walked, that was her thing to clear her mind, and then it was actually when COVID kicked up, that was really when it started to get worse and worse and worse, and it got to the point that she wasn't able to go for her walks. Now, when she came to me, she was obviously very distressed, in a depressed state because of the fact that she couldn't do anything, she couldn't exercise, she had no outlet, she couldn't go to work, okay, because of this pain had gotten more severe. Now, one of the things that I had done with her after we had gone through the assessment and after we had gotten an understanding of what may be contributing is I was telling her to lean into it just a little bit more. All I wanted to do, instead of when you get a little dart of pain, instead of avoiding it and trying to avoid it forevermore, to when you get the dart, come back, reassess, take a nice breath, and then lean into it again and see if the same dart comes back each time. And what she found is the more that she was able to play with it and the more she was able to lean into it and kind of move around, the better able that she was to get control over it in a lot of ways. And she was able then to start building it up a bit more. Now, the pain didn't go away completely just because she leaned into it. There was a lot of other factors that we did as well, around breathing, around strength training, around mobility training. There was all these other factors that we did too, or other adjuncts, I should say, that we did. But it was the idea that she was allowed to lean into the pain, she was allowed to feel a small bit of the pain, and that wasn't a bad thing. That was one of the things that really set her free to start to make massive improvements. And over time then, she had got from not being able to walk properly because of the pain to running a marathon, and that was done in 20 weeks. That was because it was a big mindset change, and we just focused and we nailed down that mindset change. And she was a resilient, very, very resilient lady, really, really strong, well able to, once she set her mind to something, she was able, and she had a bit of direction, she was able to continue on down that path. And the same, anyone can continue down that path, or anyone could do that. I actually have a program out at the moment, the Spine Initiative program, and it'd be worth checking out if you were dealing with this type of an issue. If you have a back pain that's affecting your ability to exercise and you want to get back into exercising, it goes through all the things that I talk about on the podcast in detail, with the breathing, the language, the mindset, the physical side of things, the tolerance, the deconditioning, all of them. It takes them all into account, and it really focuses on the mind-body connection and learning about your body. But if you want to check that out in the description after this podcast, or right now, whenever you want to, you can see the website and you can see if it's suitable for you. And it's a thing, you can do it yourself. It's a course that you'll be able to download, and it goes through, it has all the videos for everything on it. Now, the reason I tie that into it is because within that course, a lot of the stuff that I talk about is understanding what the pain is and understanding what's contributing to the pain. And this is the thing when you're talking about leaning into the pain, is if you can get an understanding of what's actually contributing to the issue. Is it the stress that's going on? Is it because you have a presentation due? Is it because you've had a fight with someone? Or is it because you had poor sleep for the last 3 weeks? It could be that you are a mother and that everything around you is just so busy because you have, let's say you've new kids. Your system is on high alert. Okay, or new babies, I should say, not new kids, new babies. And maybe you have a flock of them, and they're just running around and they're causing havoc, and your system now is on high, it's really, really sensitive. You start to feel this back pain a lot more. And the same thing can go, you can start to feel the back pain, it can hypersensitize the sciatic nerve, it can do a lot more to you as well. And it really does, once it starts to get bad, it affects your mood and affects your mental health as well. So that's why it's so important to try to take care of these things when you can. But if that is the case and your system now has become really hypersensitive to any movement at all, there's a certain element of, if you want to get that movement back, you will have to endure a little bit of extra pain that you control yourself while you do that. Okay, and this is why it's important to go to a practitioner and get an understanding of what's going on, and not just look at the mechanical, look at the neurological, look at the emotional, and try to take all of those things into account. But once you start to lean into the pain, and once you start to kind of, I guess, edge off it, what it does is it gives you back control over your life. Because you now can say, well, if I go into a lunge position, I know that it's going to be sore for the first 3 to 4 lunges. But the more I do it, the less pain I get. Having that idea in your mind, knowing that I can do these things and it's going to cause it to kick up, but afterwards it's going to feel better. It gives you back control and it removes the fear. And as I was saying, the idea of fear and like it being a scary thing and you really anticipating the pain, that can take a grip over you. That can really control your life. And I think people miss out on that when they focus too much on the mechanical. They say, I'm getting back pain because of my posture, because I sit all day. But it's the back pain in itself might be a 4 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 pain normally. But when you hypersensitize that system, that back pain becomes a 9 out of 10. That becomes severe debilitating pain. But there's no increase in injury. It's just that your body has become so hyper aware of it, and you have gotten to the stage that you don't want any movement with any pain, so you're avoiding all these movements, you're avoiding kind of different activities that you enjoy, so you're never giving your body a chance to kind of figure out what the main issue is, so it continues to close in and close in and close in and close in, and now you can't bend over, touch your toes, you can't even extend back, or you can't reach up into a cabinet without getting shots of pain. Okay, so this is the idea when it comes into like when you have this hypersensitive system. Sometimes you do have to lean into it, but at the same time you need to be smart, because if you go leaning into it too much, the next day it's going to be really sore, and you want to try avoid that. Okay, you're trying to find the right balance of when can I lean into it a little bit and kind of let play around with it a small bit, and when is leaning into it too much. And that takes learning. That isn't something that I can just say this is the trick and this is how you do it right now. That takes learning about your body. It takes learning about your reactions, your mindset, the things that work for you, the things that don't work for you. Like that, there's a lot more to that, and the more time you spend figuring this out, the better able you'll be able to kind of get an understanding of that. And just because you clear up, just as a side note, because you clear up one flare-up doesn't mean that you've cleared up flare-ups forevermore. It just means that you have taken control of that one, and now you need to continue working to build a tolerance, to build a condition so that you're not getting flare-ups every 3 weeks or 3 months or 5 months or whatever it is you get it. Some people get them like twice a year, 3 times a year. But you don't want to get to the point that a flare-up is lasting for 6 weeks. If you get a flare-up, you understand how to fix it, you work around it, and you kind of lean into it a bit more. You know what works for you in each situation, and it's not taking a lot of painkillers, because that just extends a flare-up. You understand what works for you in each situation, and you try to lean into that a bit more. You'll find that the flare-ups don't last 6 weeks, that they only last 3 to 4 days or 2 days as you start to get better at it. And then at a certain stage, like John, a guy who I've been working with for a while, said that I haven't had a flare-up in 2 years. And this guy has run marathons upon marathons, he's run trail runs, he's done everything since, because he's just gotten this control and he's gotten this understanding of his body now, that he knows when he can push and when he can pull back, and he knows the signs of his body before a flare-up kicks up. That's a huge part of the work that we do together, is that, okay, how are you feeling this week? How's the body reacting? And he's able to pick out, I have this sign here, I'm noticing that my hips are starting to get tight in this area, I notice that I'm starting to get a bit more irritated, and he has his own signs and symptoms, and then we say, okay, well then it's probably due to pull back a small bit. And we've gone so far just through managing it that simple way, and then adding strength and exercises on top of that, you would be surprised. And that's the thing that a lot of physios miss out on, I feel, is that they're too soon that they give people, okay, just do these 3 to 4 exercises and come back, correct your sleep and then come back, and that deals with it in the moment, but it doesn't deal with it long term, and you don't learn then what actually works for you long term. And honestly, like I will talk about it again, that is the reason that I created the Spine Initiative, is so that you can take it. I obviously can't work with everyone one-to-one, but you take it, you're able to work on it yourself, you get an understanding of it. If you do have any questions, you just send me a message anyway on Instagram and ask me, but you get an understanding of it, and then you can start to improve day by day. And as I said, it's a journey. It's not just a do these exercises and you're fixed. It's okay, now that this is done, what are the next things? What are the bad habits and patterns that are catching me? And I've just added that video now recently because it was a question that I got asked on it, was what are some of the patterns that or the mental things that kind of bring me back, and some of the beliefs that are causing the flare-ups to happen more often. And we really went into detail on that. And some of the beliefs, and just to kind of go off on a side tangent, some of the beliefs that you have about your body being broken, you have a bad back, your family has a bad back, your doctor told you couldn't do something. These beliefs, they hide. They're nice and deeply tucked in, and then they come out again, or they come out, you get a little bit of a flare-up. It's a small flare-up, but because you have this belief, your reaction is, okay, well, my family have always had bad backs, so this is going to get bad, and this is going to get worse, and then, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. Take a lot of painkillers, I need to stop doing everything, and you can see how the cycle starts again. I can speak on it like this because I've seen so many people do this and go through this cycle. It's such a common cycle, and once you recognize it, you can break it. And that's partly the reason that I'm doing this podcast right now, is that if you can just lean into it at the start a small bit when you notice it's kicking up, then you can often make a lot of gains early on. So it decreases pain overall by increasing it at the start and then dropping it down after. It gives you back control over your life, so you can determine how much you want and how much is going to contribute to it. But it also becomes less scary then, because you don't fear the pain as much, because you have an understanding that, okay, this isn't an injury that I'm leading into as much. This is more that my system is hypersensitive, and as I take this down, I'll get a better understanding of the injury itself. Which leads me to the last one, which is you need to learn about what's going on and what you can do. A simple example of recently is I sprained my knee recently. The day after, my knee couldn't move in any position. Like, it was really sore to extend, it was really sore to flex, it was really sore to stand on it or try to walk or to do anything on it. But I knew this concept. I obviously understand this. I have a good enough understanding of this concept, considering I do it every day. So, and that's not mean, I don't mean to be cocky when I say that. It's just that I see this happening so often, and I know the reactions to it, and I've been through the sports, I've been through the issues myself, that I can kind of give you a better idea of how to deal with acute, and to give you a better idea of how to deal with the chronic ones. And the acute is like a knee sprain. A chronic one is like if you have a back injury and it keeps going for a couple of months to a couple of years at a time. That's the difference, just in case anyone doesn't know. But within the injuries, what I did is the next day, once it started to kick up, I said, I need to figure out where the actual issue is. So I started to lean into it a small bit more. I started to do the little basic swings, small mini lunges, mini squats, all this light stuff to see where it was. And it was sore. And every time I stood up off the chair, it got really sore. But as I started to move, and as I started to take the stairs instead of the elevator, I found that I had so much more movement in it. There wasn't that much pain unless I went into the very end ranges of extension and the very end ranges of flexion. And if I went into a valgus position, which is where you bring your knee to the inside, they were the movements that I was able to isolate and say, okay, these ones are causing more trouble, so I need to be a bit more careful at this. And then as I got better at those movements, as the weeks went by, I started to figure out, okay, well, I'm actually able to do a little bit of light jogging here. And then one time I did a bit of light jogging. I was crossing a road is actually what it was, and there was a car coming, so I went to jog faster across the road, and I jumped out with my leg to try jump onto the curve, and I got a massive dart in my knee. Like, it slipped, basically. It felt like the knee would slip place. And that gave me the indication that, okay, straight away it was fairly sore. I was kind of limping around for a few minutes after, trying to play it off as if nothing happened, but my God, it was sore. But what I did then is I knew that, okay, jumping and landing is a weak point. So I'm going to restrict jumping and landing until I build it up. But I'm not going to stop jumping and landing for the rest of my life. I'm just going to try pull back, and I'm going to see if I can do little jumps and little landings in the gym. That's the way it was. And then obviously when it slipped out of place, I had to go back to the start again because it all kicked up, it all flared up. So I had to go back to the movements, the light movements again. But because it got really sore and really painful, I didn't start looking for loads of new ways of fixing it. This is the thing. I knew what was going to work. I knew the same simple movements were going to help it again. But I knew also that there was a certain time frame. Like, I was going to have to wait a day or 2 days for this to work. So it's when you are leaning into it, you have to understand that it's not going to fix it straight away. But what you do today pays off tomorrow. It will take down the pain as you get it moving, there's no question. But more so, it's tomorrow that you're going to start to feel better, and the day after that you're going to start to feel better. I think too often we get stuck in looking for the quick fix and the fix right now, that we get blinded to actually what's working, because we're trying something and then we book in with a physio, and then they tell us it's a different diagnosis, and then we book in with a doctor because we want to be sure, and they tell us it's a different one, and then we go to an MRI and we get an MRI and we get normal results at an MRI that anyone would get, but now we start attributing our pain because we have degenerative disc disease on the MRI, which is apparent in 50% of people with or without pain. So that's a little side one just to remember. That is the case though. You have to understand that you leaning into it sometimes is a great way of getting an understanding. It's a great way of taking down the pain, and it gives you back control. But that's all I really wanted to talk about. I wanted to just give you a quick rundown, a nice fast podcast to talk about. Sometimes it is okay to lean into the pain, and sometimes it's the risk that you're managing. You're not going to jump into the pain. Like my knee example, I'm not going to jump the same distance to test to see if it's okay. I will start smaller and build it up over a while, and I'll get a better understanding of it. But if you just start leaning into it and start taking high risk and doing explosive stuff, then you're obviously going to cause it to get way worse. But if you can start small and build it up, then a lot of times you can make it way better. As always, important to reach out to your therapist, your physio, your doctor, whoever it is, to make sure that they get a look at it and to make sure that you have an idea of that you're not doing any more damage. That's really important. But yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about. Is just it's sometimes pain can be a good thing, in terms of it teaches you can learn a lot from the pain, and you can learn a lot about your body and how you react from the pain. But that is all. I would recommend you check out if you go into the description of this podcast, I have that free ebook that you can download, and it talks about pain sensitivity, it talks about the burn spot, and it gives you a better understanding of all the stuff that I talked about on this podcast. Otherwise, if you want that, check out the spineinitiative.com, and it's in the description of this podcast too, and that also will point you in the right direction of what to do, how to get back to exercise, and it'll teach you all of the things that I talked about here. But that's all from me. If anyone has any questions at all, as always, either email me at info@themobilitytutor.com or just reach out to me on Instagram at The Mobility Tutor on Instagram. As always, guys, I would love if you could pass this around to your friends, or if you could share it on your story. It goes a long way in promoting the podcast, and I really appreciate it if you found this podcast beneficial, to maybe share it on your story or to send it to a friend or someone who you also think may benefit from it. It's the best way of promoting it, but it's nice to get second opinions off people who are also interested in it. And lastly, if you do get a chance, I'd love if you're on Spotify to rate it, and if you're on iTunes as well, to rate it. It's just at the top, scroll up and you can click it there. It's same idea. It's a great way of promoting the podcast so it can get to more people and who can also benefit from it too. But that is all for me, and I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one. Okay guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking to learn more about what we do, as well as check out any of the mobility and rehab programs we have available, just head over to the description of this podcast and you will find a link to all the programs there. As always, thank you for listening, and I will chat to you all again in the next episode. Have a good one.